Okay, so I'm going to paint an imaginary vase of flowers, but I think because I have this really watery blue on my palette, I'm just going to water it down even more, and I'm going to just do kind of like a mason jar situation here. So a mason jar kind of comes down and has a rounded top. And of course you could trace out a drawing first. I've just painted a lot of mason jars in my day. So I'm pretty familiar with the shape here, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not worried about that so much. Okay, so that's my basic mason jar shape here. And then I kind of want to decide, I think I'll pretend like the light is coming from this way. And so I will kind of start shading just a little bit. And my paper is dry here, but my paint is quite thin. So I'm just kind of shading a little bit here. So that this looks like one of those cute little, you know, blue mason jars. And I will put some shadows in later as well, but this is good enough for where we are right now. Now, I just want to kind of think about what kind of flowers I'm going to be using. I'm casting a shadow on that. So I think I'm going to do some peonies. And then we'll fill in with maybe some daisies and, I don't know, some other flowery things. This looks like it's just a little bit too much there. Okay. Okay, so I have just started mixing up some colors on my palette. I have iridescent white. You can absolutely use like Chinese white or titanium white watercolors to mix these. So I just have a drop of my dioxazine purple with a pile of the iridescent white. We're going to be using that. I also have some iridescent white with a couple of drops of my ultramarine. And then here I have sap green kind of in the middle. I have a little bit of the Hansa yellow light over here to make a yellow green. And then on this side, I use some of the quinacridone rose to neutralize my green. So I've kind of got a variety of greens. I've got Hansa yellow light, and then I have the quinacridone rose, and then I have it mixed with the white here as well. So kind of the first thing that I want to do is think about my composition a little bit. And one way that I sketch sometimes is to take something very, very watery and light on my palette. So I'm just barely going to be making a mark so that I can make a sketch and I can, you know, go over top of it if it's not what I want. So I think I'm going to do kind of, you know, thinking about my rule of thirds. If my paper were a grid, I'm going to want kind of a big flower somewhere right around here. I'm going to want maybe something going kind of sideways-ish here, right? I'm going to want something kind of tall and skinny, kind of going up like this. I'm going to want another flower kind of going up maybe like this. I'll want kind of a bigger flower-ish here. Maybe, you know, something smaller here. And then we'll probably want to kind of balance this out like this, and maybe a couple of droopier things. So that's kind of my plan. So I'm gonna start up here with like a peony type of thing. And so I'm gonna take this very light pink that I have here, and I'm gonna start kind of just with the tip of my brush making some circles. But I'm breaking up my line as I'm going. And then as I start to move out, and these could be peonies, they could be roses, you know. Another good tip is when you put your brush down, you kind of wiggle it, and that gives you that kind of ruffly edge on your flowers. And then here, since I'm kind of doing a peony, it's going to kind of cup up like this, and this is going to be kind of its own. And there's no real right or wrong here. You know, every flower is unique, so don't get too bogged down on this. So I'm just going into my quinacridone rose, and I'm starting to drop in kind of some darker sections. Now, yes, my paper is dry, but I just put wet paint down, so what's happening in these leaves right now is wet on wet. And so we're just kind of defining some edges, leaving a lot of it very nice and soft. There we go. And make it a little bit darker here. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone. But I'm going to go ahead and do basically the same thing here. And I'm turning my paper so that it's easier for me to work. But I'm going to be starting here and making that C kind of shape that we looked at before. And bringing it down around, kind of joining it up here. And do that again on this side. And then one more kind of in the middle. And this is gonna give us kind of this, okay, this is a droopy flower kind of sitch, you know? And then I'm just dropping in some of the darker pigment, the quinacridone rose, and just a couple of spots. Okay. So we're gonna let that alone. Now, on this one, I want to, you know, do something maybe a little bit different with this, and make it a little bit more peachy. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of cad red and some of my quinacridone and make that color, and then drop in some of the titanium white, or I'm sorry, it's and then a little bit of the hands of yellow, so we get more of like an orangey peachy color. So I want this one to really be kind of cupping up like this. So I'm kind of finding where my center is, and then I'm bringing these colors down and around. A lot of these, you know, brush strokes are all really kind of the same, where you're pressing down with the tip of your brush and then using what's in the barrel of your brush to make these kind of more dramatic swoopy lines. And I want this a little bit more orangey in spots, so I just added a little bit more of the cad red. And so now I can go in here. And so cool color, warm color, right? So we're kind of bouncing those around so that it's interesting for our eyes. Okay. And then I think, just because I want to keep this kind of a balanced thing, I'm gonna put maybe like an orange bud over here. So kind of making that leaf shape, but I want this one not to be so open. And then tapping in some of the darker color a little bit on the base here. Okay, so I'm happy with how that's started out. Let's see, I want to put some daisies in, and I think they're such fun flowers to make, but daisies are one of those things that people are like, well, how are you going to paint a white flower? So this is what we do. I'm going to put like this is the white with just a tiny hint of purple in it, the quinacridone purple. And I'm just making these shaggy leaf shapes. I'm gonna do kind of an open daisy-like flower. We can grab just a tiny bit more of that purple. Just the tiniest bit. And we're really just barely any paint, and we just want it on the tip of our brush. And then we're gonna just kind of drop in some shadows here. Just a little bit. Remember, our light's kind of coming from here, although, okay. So once we get leaves and everything else, it really is going to read like more of a white flower. I am not super thrilled with this middle part. It's looking like there's too much paint here. So I'm just wiping my brush and taking a little bit out. Okay. And then I'm going to put another one of those kinds of flowers up here, but I'm going to do it so that it's kind of more on its side. And I think let's see, I need one more. I think up here. And again, just with a little bit of this purple, we're gonna kind of, find some of these edges, especially in the shadow. If I get a little bit too much, I just take my damp brush and soften it up. Take a little bit off the brush, come back in, soften it some more. And then we'll do the same over here. And again, I'm going to have to go and soften. Okay. So now I'm going to do kind of some more purpley flowers. I'm going to still use whatever is left over here of my white and just blend it in here. I can always use more, but I want to do this. And I want to have kind of up here some of these tall, kind of lavendery looking things. And it's just with the tip of your brush. The hardest thing here is not making it look like one giant blob. You need to, you know, leave some white space so that your paint doesn't all run together. These never live alone, so we'll want to put one kind of going like this. And maybe it curves up there just a little bit. And maybe there's another one kind of going up here. Okay. And then I'm probably going to want to put another one of those kind of down here. And again, this is all just with the tip of your brush. You're not doing anything fancy here. And kind of, but we're trying to move the eye all the way around. So I don't hate the idea of just doing like, this one would be kind of like, okay, this one is barely there. Okay, so I'm good with that. Now, I'm thinking I'm nearly finished with this composition, and I think that there will be some more fillers. One thing that I think could be cute is to just do some little yellow flowers, and I'm just using the tip of my brush to plop in these little tiny yellow flowers. And you really do not need to be precious with this. None of mine look perfect or symmetrical even, and don't worry about it. And then maybe we'll just plop in a couple over here. And when you're doing florals, it is pleasing to the eye to use odd numbers. I'm going to use this same yellow to start also plopping in the centers for my daisies. And I'm using the exact same stroke, you know, just really tapping the end of my brush there. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and start doing some of the foliage and the leaves. I'm going to start with the more like yellowy green, the lighter color to start. And I'm going to start just dragging down some stems. What I recommend for your stems is that you don't, you know, they're going to be thicker at the ends, right, than they are in the middle. And you're having water in your vase, so you don't want your lines to be straight. You want them to kind of, especially once you get into, so here I'm just picking up a little bit of the darker green. Giving my leaves some variation. I just have too much paint on my brush. So we're really just dropping in these stems, making sure that we're keeping them nice and wiggly on the inside. I'm varying the color of my green as I drop in the stems. Let's see. This one here. With the lavender, you want to bring your branches kind of in a broken line through the actual flowers. You can do lots of little kind of leaf shapes up here where you're just, you know, making little marks for your leaves. I am barely touching the paper with the tip of my brush here. You can, of course, change to a smaller brush if that makes you more comfortable. But the way that the tips on these brushes are, you really don't have to. So you can use basically the same brush for the entire painting. Now I'm going to take a little bit more here and I'm going to start adding in some leaves. And again, I'm pressing down and pulling up. Once you paint that leaf, you can come back in with just a little bit of the darker pigment. I've kind of started these leaves here, and I like this one to be bigger, I think, and this one to kind of be coming here, connecting to this flower a little bit better. I've got little leaves there. Put one here, and maybe one here. If your paint isn't flowing off your brush, you don't have enough water on your brush. So, you know, keep that in mind as you're painting, that you need to make sure that you keep enough water on your brush so your paint will flow. Okay. Another fun thing, and you can do this with like a rigger that has the long thing, and holding your brush way back here, you can do like some cute little curly cues. It's especially fun for like wildflowers like this. This is also a really fun thing to, gosh, this rigger is terrible. I need to get my soap out and reshape. This is a fun spot to do like things like little berries. So maybe up here, I'm gonna take and make some little branchy kinds of things, and maybe some kinds of here, and maybe a few kind of right up here. I'm thinking I need a few more leaves here. So I just took a little sap green and I neutralized it with a little red, right? Opposite on the color wheel. Nice big leaf here. Okay. I do kind of feel like this is unbalanced down here just a little bit, so I'm just going to throw in that. I do also like to put, just when I'm doing a floral thing like this, just put some of the colors from your flowers just right there in the water. It does something for the composition. It's really nice. Let's see, I'm gonna take some of this rose madder just on its own here, and where I put these little things, I'm just gonna pop in some little berry things. And again, I'm just using the very tip of my brush here to add some of these little berries. And this really just kind of keeps that same color palette going all the way through. All right, I think that's about it for this. I am gonna take just this iridescent blue that I had, and with my rigger, my in very bad shape rigger, I am going to kind of write in broken lines, right? It's watery, so you're not gonna see this everywhere. But I know that a mason jar says mason, right? Ball mason. So I'm just gonna do that, and I think it has like a little swooshy thing. So I'm just gonna do it like that. I don't have one sitting in front of me right now, so I'm kind of making it up as I go. But then with this water too, I wanna go ahead and put in some indications that this is water, and I'm just using incredibly thin paint and a lot of water, and I'm going over it, and I'm absolutely fine if my stems and these little spots of flower color that I put in here, if that starts to kind of bleed a little bit, I am happy about that, because that looks more watery. I think my water line was a little bit too low, so I'm just bringing it up. So we're barely seeing the mason part, but we do still see the ball, and it looks nice and wet and watery here. All right, so now that our flowers are done and our water is done, we'll add some background and some shadows. Okay, now it's time for us to put some finishing touches on this little floral painting, and we're gonna start by kind of amping up some of the colors in certain spots. So I'm just gonna take some of this quinacridone rose and kind of go back over whether these are peonies or roses or whatever they are. I think they look more like roses, but anyway, I'm just darkening up, like this front leaf, for example, needs to be a little darker. So it's dry at this point, but I'm still using a pretty thin wash of paint. But it's just giving a little bit more definition right there, which I think that one needed. And again, with this orange, I'm just gonna go over a couple of spots, just a little tiny bit. I'm not trying to overwork this too much. Going over just some of this stuff a little bit to make it read more orangey. And this brush is really in bad shape. I might need to just retire it. But it's okay. I'm making it work. Okay. We can also go into some of our leaves, and I'm gonna switch brushes because this to a different detail brush, just because that one is driving me a little bit crazy. So I've got my sap green, and this has a little cad red in it just to make it darker, again neutralizing. And I'm just going to start popping in a few little details on these leaves at the very, very front. Kind of darkening this side here. And I'm going to do the same with some of these stems, just like, you know, and some of these leaves. Just a little bit more detail, kind of darkening on this side that is more in our shadow here. Okay, I think that's good enough. And then I do have where I took my little sketch. I've got just this little spot that I think I'm gonna add a couple more of those little berry things. And speaking of those berries, we can take either some of our purple or our green and just put, I'm using a little bit of purple, and put little dots on top of these little berry things. And we can do the same, just with the same purple. I think that the yellow and purple look really cute together. And just put the centers into our little yellow flowers here too. So for those of you that have been like, oh my gosh, if she makes me paint one more messy wet thing, I think you'll enjoy this exercise. This is a bonus. We didn't do this in class, and this is not something that, you know, I've got on the roster for this class, but I know that it's something that y'all were looking at. So now I want to start painting my cast shadow here, and I'm going to be using mostly purple. This is the dioxazine purple. It's a convenience color on my palette, but I really like it. And I'm also going to add a little blue to that, so it's a little bit more blue. And then maybe just a little bit more. I'm trying to neutralize this just a little bit, but I still want it to be quite purple. So I threw a little yellow in. Uh-oh, too far. Too far. And that's about what I want. You know, I can just test it here. Yeah. So that's nice. That's what I'm looking for. And I can actually throw a little bit more blue into part of it too, because I want to define the bottom here. I also want to come back in and get this part of the container a little bit darker and bringing it up. We're making this look more round. So this is just a little bit of a darker blue. And I just put some more water on so I can kind of smooth this out. And really playing at the bottom here. And then I'm just gonna start moving into my cast shadow. So I'm gonna take this cast shadow up and around. I just have water basically on my brush right now. And then I'm gonna go in with this more kind of browny purple that we mixed up for our shadow color. And then go back in with a little bit more of this blue. Bring the shadow just over a little bit more. And down. We can also do a few kind of shadows down here, mimicking kind of some of our flower structures. So we can see, and you know, maybe our table kind of goes like this. But we can see some of these other shadows playing out. And then I'm just kind of blending this in and go back and do this a little darker again over here. And I'm just kind of playing it by eye. Now, up here, we don't really have any background to speak of, and I don't want to get crazy or anything here doing too much, but I might want to incorporate some of these colors in the painting into the background. So what I'm going to do is just use some of this Hansa yellow and this orange color. Maybe a little bit more of that, a little bit more of the Hansa yellow. All right, so I get this pretty like orangey sunny color, and a very, very light watery wash is what I'm using here. And I am just gonna start dropping it in little places here on kind of this sunny side of my painting. And that's okay, right? I got a little bit there, but that's gonna be actually a happy little accident, and it's gonna look really pretty, and it's gonna look kind of free. And then I'm gonna take kind of that bluey purple mix and start dropping that in on this cooler side. And this is just kind of giving a little bit of dynamic motion here. I've just managed to like mix all the colors on my palette together while I was talking with my hands. So I think I'm gonna leave it alone here. And I mean, you can go in and just lightly kind of define this horizon a little bit more. And soften this out. And I'm just really kind of taking that gray up just a little bit. And then I lost some. of my cast shadow here, so I'm just dropping this in just a little bit darker. Okay, well, that's it for this. Hopefully you like this exercise. Hopefully it will give you something fun to do this weekend. And we do have our reception at the Art Center on Saturday.